just arrived back in the UK from 2 days in Spain. Unbelievable difference in the weather. Yesterday I was on the beach in Sitges, and sorry, I'm just talking to the camera. Yesterday I was on a beach in Sitges. Today took off from Barcelona in the most horrendous storm. And landed back in the UK this morning to bright sunshine. So an amazing turnaround in the weather. But during this quick trip, and it was a quick trip, I managed to finish this book. No pun intended. And so when I get home, I'm going to give you a quick review on what Kimi Räikkönen's book is like. Sorry, I wasn't being rude, I was just talking to the camera. Right, Kimi's book. Now, the first thing to say about Kimi's book is that I thoroughly enjoyed it. I couldn't put it down, and there are not that many books, particularly F1 books, that I can say that about. I'm pretty terrible at reading books. I start them, I get halfway through, and then I sort of drift away quite often. This one, I've read it within a couple of weeks, which is, with my busy schedule, that is pretty good going, I've got to say. So I loved it. I thought it was fascinating, really, really interesting story that he's got to tell. And that's the key to this book. We don't hear anything from Kimi Räikkönen on a race weekend. He hates the F1 media. He hates everything about it. To be fair, he keeps getting asked utterly mundane, ridiculous questions like, how did the car feel today? What are your chances going to be like on Sunday? Blah, 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 blah. He hates all of that. And so he just gives a standard stock answer that gives us nothing, no insight into the Kimi Räikkönen world. Well, this book gives us that insight, and it gives us some really good insight. So right from the beginning, when he was just a kid starting to go karting, where his family had no money at all, you know, the real kind of description of how they managed to struggle through borrowing money left, right and centre, kind of risking everything as a family to give the two boys, Kimi and his brother, the opportunity to kind of go racing, go karting, and see where it might end up. And then to obviously follow that story through to the sort of trials and tribulations, the ups and downs, the close calls, you know, the times when he didn't think he was going to be able to go racing because he was having to do compulsory military service in the Finnish military. And he kept skipping that to go to races, and there's some really great stories about that kind of, you know, and I'm sure most racing drivers have some tales like this, but there's such near misses that could have meant that the whole thing turned out so very differently, and he may never have made it, and if he hadn't made it, he'd probably end up as a mechanic. You know, his dad was a mechanic, his brother was Kimi's mechanic, and that kind of made me appreciate why and just how much Kimi appreciates his team, his mechanics, his engineers, what they do for him. You know, I felt it, I knew it when he was at McLaren with us, but you know, that his history, his background he's got a very hands-on background, and so he appreciates other people who are hands-on, who can get things done. So that was really interesting. There's obviously a lot of stories about the partying. And, you know, they're very funny. There's some really good ones. There's some eye-opening ones. I mean, I was part of some of these occasions. I was there in some of the stories that are in this book. I was there at those moments. And it's really nice on a personal level for me to kind of read a different side of it and a different opinion and a different memory of how it happened. There's some really sad moments. Really very sad story about the death of his father, Massa. Is such a lovely man, and somebody who laid everything on the line to get Kimi to where he is, and it was such a sad tale of how he died, and Kimi talks quite openly about how that affected him and still affects him to this day. There's quite interesting stuff about Ferrari, and about his time at Ferrari, and about how you know, the time in between races, how that's changed over the years from when we were testing constantly back in the day to now having a lot more free time, and in the sort of mid to late 2000s, how he spent that time basically drinking, And then on to the sort of modern day where he's now happily settled down with Mintu, got 2 kids, and the change in him is pretty obvious from the outside. I can see it all the time, but to see him and to read about him talking about being a father is really, really nice, heartwarming stuff. He's taken to that role, I mean, unbelievably well, and it's changed him. It's changed his whole world for the better. So, real interesting tale of Kimi, of the Kimi Räikkönen story. And if you have just even the mildest interest and intrigue about Kimi, and let's face it, we all do, then you need to go and get this book and read it, because you will learn an awful lot about Kimi. I've known him for years, and I learned an awful lot about Kimi. I guess the one thing I might say is that there's an awful lot more than is in this book. And I know that, and I'm sure lots of you will have heard stories and know things that have happened that you'd have loved to have heard more about in the book. So if we're going to balance out the argument and give a criticism, perhaps there's an awful lot more that could have been said in here. I mean, so much more that you could imagine there'd be another book. But it does say on the front of their cover there, this is the first and the last authorised book on F1 World Champion Kimi Räikkönen. Well, if it's the last, then I think we've missed out on a huge chunk of the story. Maybe that was deliberate, maybe Kimi didn't want to share it all. I can completely understand that, but that was my feeling. Well worth reading. And while we're on the subject of F1 books, I might as well get the plug in now. This one is out today, Thursday, 1st of November. The paperback version of my book, The Mechanic, is out in all good bookshops. It's actually out in more bookshops in paperback version than it was in hardback form, so you should be able to find it anywhere you get your books. It's also on Amazon, and I will put a link in the description of this video if you want to go and get it. Happy Christmas. Look at that. You can't tell me that is not going to fit perfectly in a stocking. Go check it out. 2 very, very good and worthwhile F1 books, even if I do say so myself. What is going on with our weather? It's taken a massive turn for the worse, and we've just had a power cut at home. It's been off, power's been off now for an hour, and I've got work to do, so I've been forced, absolutely forced, with no other alternative but to come to the local pub to carry on. See you tomorrow.